The other big thing that happened overnight was Ruby Walsh set the internet alight with his comments. There was the show on RTE last night about the greatest moment of the 1990s, and Ruby Walsh really feels very strongly that Ray Houghton's goal, Ireland beating Italy, the experience of World Cup '94 really shouldn't have even been considered as one of those moments. Now, if, like me, you feel that's kind of ridiculous, do get in touch and let us know, or if you agree with Ruby. But the idea that Ray Houghton and that brilliant celebration shouldn't have been included in the list last night. I mean, he did sort of, I looked it up there and I'd kind of forgotten that he'd scored early. Ireland had scored early and managed to hold on to a lead as well, which is a bit of an uncommon theme these days. He scores after 11 minutes. But the idea that such an iconic moment in a world game against a team who would go on to compete in the final, and an Irish team who will go on to compete in the last 16 of a World Cup in a sport that is as far-reaching as soccer, beyond all the other things like rugby and, I mean, horse racing and maybe some other sports as well, and, you know, be knocked out of the last 16 by a team who would themselves be beaten by the team who would go on to win the World Cup. Like, the entire thing and its place in the history of Irish life, Irish sport, to suggest that it's as one-dimensional as, well, we only beat one team and we didn't win the World Cup, so it shouldn't be included as a great moment of the 90s, or that you hang success only on the fact that it would only have deserved to have been included. And even then, you know, maybe a horse winning a race that 9 other competitors might have won in one-off race might have usurped it. But the idea that success is really only hung around the idea that you can win the World Cup is just utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess it is. What's his point? Kind of, and I do agree with you, and I completely disagree with Ruby. But what's his point? Not that we won one game. It wasn't to do with like the magnitude of it. He just couldn't comprehend the idea that it was just one victory, because it was 94 he's referring to here, isn't it? Like, if you gave me these quotes and you said these are quotes coming from a mystery sports person, who do you think it is? I would naturally pick one of Ireland's racing elite, probably Ruby Walsh, maybe Aidan O'Brien, somebody who prides on coming first. Not only just prides coming first, but that's the only way your success is gauged, because of the sheer volume of top-class races there are, and of course the culture of winning that there is in Irish national hunt racing and in Irish flat racing. So that's just his worldview in sport, is that if you're not first, you're last. And I think that kind of helps him to misunderstand what this actually means. But at the same time, and I think you were making this point outside, like, how can you be that one-dimensional that you can't actually kind of posture yourself in a different way and look at it from a different perspective and just appreciate the insane scenes in Giant Stadium, that this is an incredible sporting moment? Like, because it's not Ireland's greatest sporting success. Some would argue it was a hugely successful moment.
The programme is not about achievements, it's not about success. The entire point of the show, as I understand it, and I admit I didn't see it last night, I have seen the clip, as I understand it, it's about a moment, right? So the moment is, I think the whole point about creating a show built around a moment is that you get to shape that moment into whatever significance it can be. But it's clearly not success. It's not, the entire thing is not success. But even at that, I would consider Ireland's participation at the World Cup in '94 as a successful thing. It could have been more successful, but like, that was a pretty successful thing. Yeah,
because we had the argument last week. Was it Ted Walsh, I think? I know. Like, there's a theme developing here, and it's not a coincidence. As I say, the racing thing, it is important to remember where they're coming from, that if you're not first, you're last. That is a huge thing.
I kind of think it's, I take your point, but I do think that if you're so insular that you can't see beyond your own sport and the fact that success is either winning a race or not.
Yeah, but the point I was trying to make there is Ted Walsh was making the comparison between the football team and the rugby team, and that the rugby team winning the Grand Slam is a greater achievement than what Ireland have done in either Italia '90 or USA '94. And like, that certainly carries a bit more weight.
A bit of weight, but also then you can say that rugby is an elitist enough sport that's played amongst, at that kind of a level. I mean, the number of teams that can actually win a World Cup before a World Cup ever begins, maybe you could say it's slightly the same about football, but I mean, there is a level there with rugby that it's sort of 6 or 7 nations. That's kind of it.
Well, that's it. That's the counter-argument, and a very strong counter-argument, and one that wins. I mean, the Grand Slam doesn't stack up to the footballing achievements in the 1990s, because the volume of unbelievably successful teams, and also the difficulty that it took in qualifying. I mean, you go back to 88, you go back to 90. Like, I know 88 wasn't involved in this discussion specifically because it was just the 90s last night, but certainly the number of teams involved in these competitions obviously smaller, and like the difficulty at which it takes to get involved in these tournaments is a success in itself. But when it comes to sporting moments, you can't beat the Irish football team in the 1990s.
It's irrefutable. It is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous comment to make. And I have a huge amount of time for Ruby Walsh. She's one of these Ronan O'Gara type characters, Roy Keane type characters in Irish sport who I've always believed really calls it like it is. I just can't fathom the logic of, if you don't want to vote for it as your number one, that's totally legit. That's absolutely fine. Make your case for it. But the idea that it shouldn't be included as one of Ireland's great sporting moments of the 90s is just utterly ridiculous.
When they get to the 2000s, to the noughties, there is a high possibility that Robbie Keane scoring against Germany or Jason McAteer against Holland is going to win. One of those is probably going to win that. Like, does Roy Keane, if Robbie Keane comes first, does Roy Keane give that the same amount of praise that he would say give 94? Obviously, he's got his own he's got his own shit going on there.
He does.
But like, I get the feeling that Roy Keane is closer to Ruby Walsh than most other footballers. As in, if you're like, you have to have some sort of silverware. I know it doesn't make it right, but like,
I think it's ridiculous. I think the idea of success being a black and white thing, you win gold or you're a loser, is ridiculous. It's bullshit.
Well, that's not. I don't think it was as black and white as Ruby's.
He's saying it's not. It wasn't beating a team at a World Cup. And by the way, not just any team, but beating a team at a World Cup is not a reason for it to be considered a great moment.
Yeah, his point was that it was one win, one victory, like
against a phenomenal football nation.
Oh, I know. Like, as I say, I'm not I'm being devil's advocate here a little bit, but I think he's not saying that, oh, they had to win the World Cup for this to be successful. I think what Ruby Walsh is saying, they had to beat more than one team.
I don't know. I mean, what if they'd beaten Norway? We got a 0-0 against Norway. If we beat Norway 1-0, suddenly Ruby Walsh changes his tone entirely, and it's
not entirely, but a small bit.
I don't know. Let us know what you think. We've had loads of comments coming in. Paul Anthony Higgins on Facebook says, sour grapes from Ruby Walsh. What does he do? Sit in a horse that's going to win a race regardless and then take credit? I mean, I'm not saying that. Ruby Walsh is an incredible Irish sports person.
Go back to Annie Power 2015.
Look, like, also irrefutable stuff. Actually, Brian Kerr has a great line about who's responsible for the win in horse racing. Is the jockey? Is the trainer? Is the owner? Is the horse? Might get a bit of credit here.